All right. Hi. Thank you for tuning
Hi.
in. If you're new here, welcome. I am Dani Ellison. I am a recovery coach for adult children of narcissists. I help Black women break generational cycles of narcissistic abuse by going no contact with their parent. And I'm really excited to have a wonderful conversation with this beautiful queen here. She's going to talk to us about acupuncture today and how it can help us accelerate our healing journeys. This will be great information if you are someone who is dealing with repressed childhood trauma that you're working to, release. But also, if you are a Black woman with any slew of health concerns, this information is pertinent to you as well. So without further ado, Ms. Loria, please introduce yourself to us.
Hi, I'm Loria King. I am an acupuncturist and I just completed my doctorate in acupuncture, so I'm really excited about that. And I help Black women optimize their health by utilizing integrative medicine. And when I say integrative, I say integrative because it's complementary to what you may be doing with your Western doctor. So integrating all of your healing modalities to help you progress through whatever you're dealing with.
Okay, wonderful. Very excited. I have such an appreciation for acupuncture because, as I've shared on my channel and in some other spaces, it really helped me to get over the hump when I was almost 3 years into my no contact healing journey and just really struggling to get to the root of my maladaptive behaviors and my post traumatic stress symptoms. Within 9 months of treatment, I was like on the other side of some major hurdles. And so I would love it if Black women started to try acupuncture as a solution for, a slew of things they may be dealing with. So let me see, to get us started, what are the conditions, like maybe the top 4 or 5 conditions that you would want Black women to know that acupuncture is an effective treatment for?
Okay, I would say first on my list is hypertension. A lot of African American and African American women suffer with hypertension, so that's really huge. Another one are fibroids. I have so many friends who've had hysterectomies when there are other options out there for them. So fibroids, triple negative breast cancer is another one. And let's see, fertility. Fertility is huge. I know that there's a lot of information in the news right now if you look online, because I know that Megan, who's married to Prince Harry,
Mm-hmm.
used acupuncture to help with fertility. So a lot of people are looking into it because it's the forefront, because a lot of celebrities and large name people. But yeah, those are the things that I think are really important, especially the fibroids and hypertension.
Yes, definitely. I think for most of us, our association with acupuncture probably is fertility. I think that has been highly publicized in pop culture and television, that you can turn to acupuncture to help with fertility. But beyond that, I'm not sure that most people, especially not the common Black woman, really has an understanding for how acupuncture can, like you said, complement whatever other medical strategies they may be using to improve their health. So thank you for sharing that. I know we're going to come back to discussing those in some more detail. But why don't you talk to us about how acupuncture can help us to treat PTSD, CPTSD, and repressed childhood trauma?
Okay. Well, for a long time, the military has been using ear acupuncture. We call it auricular, but it's just simply ear acupuncture. And there are 5 points within the ear that they will put like these very teeny needles.
Mm-hmm.
And what is happening, the ear is, how can I say, a holograph, of the body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a microsystem. So within the ear, there are multiple different organs. So they'll use your lungs, and lungs are very important, right? Because in Chinese medicine, there's an emotion attached to every organ, and the lungs emotion is grief.
Okay.
And
Spell auricular for us.
uh, okay, let me write it.
Yeah.
Auricular
There you go.
and let me check and make sure that's correct.
Okay, auricular acupuncture is the specific kind that treats this sort of repressed emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
You said the ear is a hologram and a mini system. Can you, yeah, tell us more about how the ear is connected to our different organs and the emotions attached?
So when you, like, in your ear, right, because it is a microsystem, say for instance, there's a point in your ear. Okay, so the microsystem, basically, if you take a fetus, right, and if the fetus is right side up and this is a fetus's head, what you're going to do is invert it. Like, so the head is going to be here, and then the spine comes along here, right, and then the feet are down in this area. So if you go online and Google auricular acupuncture or ear acupuncture, and you look for a diagram, it'll show a fetus that's in the ear, and it'll give you the mapping out of the body. So one of the points, and it's called NADA, one of the points in the NADA protocol, which NADA is the 5 points done in the ear. And what they will normally do is they insert the needle in those 5 points, and they let you sit with the needles there. And a lot of people have, I worked with one acupuncturist who was in the doctoral program with me, and she coupled NADA with journaling.
Mm-hmm.
So, but normally what you do is they want you to just sit there and kind of allow your body to kind of calm down with the needles in. So, like I said, one of those main points is the lung. And the lung is associated within Chinese medicine grief. And it doesn't mean like grief that something died. It could be that, but it could also be that you're grieving a life that you wish that you had, or you're grieving the childhood that you didn't have, that you wish you would have had, or the parents, that you didn't have or wish you would have had, or the job that you lost, or the love that you lost, or the trauma that you had. You're grieving that trauma in a way in which, well, I wish it had been different, right? So that's all connected to the lung. Another one of the points that's they're 5, but another most important point is the kidney. In Chinese medicine, the kidney is fear. And so that's another really, really important one. So if you think of fear, you're thinking about lack. You're thinking about not feeling like you're enough, and going through life when you don't feel like you're enough and you're going through life, that shows up as fear in the body. Another major point is the sympathetic system, which will bring you from that flight and fight, or fight and flight, down. It kind of brings you down, and calms you and calms your nervous system. Because when you're in the fight and flight mode, that means you're always kind of secreting all of these chemicals that are a burden on your system. So that's another huge point in the ear. So it's called the NADA protocol, and it's something that they use a lot with vets and people who've experienced a lot of trauma, and that will help people kind of work through what they're going through. So once the needles are in and you're just sitting there or lying flat calmly, it allows your body to kind of like come back into a state of homeostasis when you're thinking about your nervous system. And then you can kind of like think in another, like, how can I say this? So if you're always in fight or flight, and let me explain a little bit about, I think a lot of people know what that is, but that means everything is heightened. So people always use the example of you're in the jungle or something, and a tiger is running after you, your body automatically goes into fight or flight, and it gives you secreting all of these chemical substances within your body that gives you a little bit extra energy to run faster, run further, think quickly. Or if you are in a situation where you're walking down an alley and you see someone, then you have to be able to respond to that. So that's your fight or flight. But think of the modern day situation of always experiencing trauma or being triggered and like bringing up the trauma that you experienced in the past. If you're always in that space, then your body is always like burning out because you're always in this hyper state. So what the needles do is they take you out of that state of mind, out of that state of being, and bring you back into a more homeostasis state so that you're able to then view things and see things and understand things without that trauma always being like thrusting you into a whole nother state. I hope that explains it.
It really does. So I told you that I had that treatment. So what you just described is really aligned to what I experienced. They put the 5 needles in. I think I went like 2 or 3 times a month, and I would sit for about 45 minutes to an hour. And during the actual session, I didn't experience much, but always after treatment, I would have these intense like upheavals of memories from the past and just feelings that felt new, even though they weren't new.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really painful initially, but once I experienced the pain and like cried about it and let it out, then I was free from it in a way that I had never experienced before I started trying acupuncture. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything more that we should expect? Like, can you speak to
Um,
the symptoms or the side effects?
well, okay, so that was one of the things that my cohort was studying. Like, that's why she had people journal. Like, she would have the needles inserted, give the person the opportunity to sit with the needles, and then afterwards, when you said you experienced that release, you would then kind of like journal, and that would help, that would aid in that release. So the thing that I love most about Chinese medicine, it's so different from a lot of Western medicine, is that we have this thing called venting, right? So, and I'll use it if you catch a cold, and this is an example. If you catch a cold, then most people would go take like over-the-counter medication to suppress the symptoms.
Right.
Whereas in Chinese medicine, you would vent it. So when you vent something up, you're not suppressing it. You're allowing it to express itself fully.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of gives you kind of a guide to the difference between the two approaches to healing. So if we go back to trauma, a lot of times when we're kids or adults and trauma happens, we will suppress that. Based on where we are, can I really deal with this now? We may shelve it. Like there's sometimes people will shelve things like, okay, I can't deal with that now, so I'm going to put it up here. Maybe I'll deal with it later. But so if you think about just we're piling and we're suppressing and piling things one on top of the other, on top of the other. So when you were having that experience, each time you would go and release, you're just removing layers and layers and layers. Whereas in Chinese medicine, instead of suppressing, we vent. So when you think of the needles and you think of the treatment, it's allowing you that space to vent, to have those emotions, like you said, fully express themselves. And when they fully express themselves, then you've released that energy and tension around them. So I kind of think of it that way. So sometimes I've noticed for some of my patients, it happens immediately after. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. It may be dreams that they have, all different levels of emotions, and it varies from patient to patient based on how you deal with emotions, how you suppress things, or how you allow things to vent in your life. So it could, and where you are in your journey as well. So it could be immediately after, it could be during the session, actually. I've needled people and they immediately start crying, right? So it varies based on where that person is in their journey and how they deal with emotions. So we have the ear acupuncture, which is the auricular, and then we also have parts on the points, I'll say, on the body. Like in Chinese medicine, right here is called the emotional belt. You know, so a lot of these points in this area we'll use to help with emotions. And we also needle the kidney points on the body as well. And that will allow for emotional release too. So there are different combination of points on the body that can be used as well as in the ear. Because remember, the ear is a microcosm, or a microsystem, I should say, a microsystem of the body. So you can use the ear or you can use the body. And I'm stopping because I don't want to go, because there's Korean where the hand, you can use the hand as well. So I'll just stop there. I don't want to do too much.
Well, I think there's room for us to come back. I'm curious to hear about the different kinds of acupuncture.
Okay.
But something you highlighted that I think is so important for Black women is that the difference between Eastern and Western medicine is that Eastern medicine focuses more on getting to the root of a problem, whereas we know that the healthcare, the medical industry in America is really about getting us to take prescriptions, getting us dependent, right, on services that are not necessarily designed to heal us, because it's a profitable business. And I think healing what you're speaking to, this emotional trauma that we repress, is critical for Black women, because we have a generation of Black women right now who are really fighting to overcome generational trauma, to really break cycles so that when they do have children, as they invest into this coming generation of children, we're able to give them an inheritance of health and wellness. They won't have to battle the same emotional struggles that we have. And that means taking accountability for the trauma that we carry from slavery, from the fallout of slavery. A lot of that is not even necessarily ours personally, even though we do have our present day experience with that fallout. But a lot of it belongs to our mothers and our grandmothers and so forth. And so something like acupuncture that can force that to the surface, and really aid us in accessing what has been kind of trapped and buried, is like a game changer. I tell every single client I have about it. With that said, do you think that there's ever a time when someone maybe should not try acupuncture because it might be too intense, or maybe it could re-traumatize them?
I would say no. I would say that is something, I'm not going to say that it's never happened, but it's something that I've never experienced in the clinics. I've never experienced, it's normally a very calming thing for people. I've not experienced where it's a bit too traumatic. Even when I needled a young woman and she started to cry, and that was, I was doing body acupuncture at the time when I did that. I just kind of gave her space to feel her emotions and kind of release them. And I didn't kind of do the whole talking thing, So that was very important, to just give her space to kind of experience that. And most acupuncturists will do that. They will give you that, they'll insert the needles and then allow you the moment. Well, they'll allow you time to kind of just be in a darkened room if you choose to have the lights off, and experience whatever it is you're experiencing. And that's based on anything that they're treating you for. Now, there are some other types of acupuncture treatments that you can get from different styles of acupuncture where they're in there with you all the time. But most of them insert the needles and then they give you space to kind of let the needles do what they do.
Okay, that's really good to hear because I've had many clients express some apprehension about getting the treatment, and maybe it's me because I tell them how intense it is. Um,
Hmm.
but I've actually had resistance from clients who say, I'm afraid that I don't have the tools to process what is going to surface. I'm afraid, and so ultimately they choose not to be treated. Um, and when I reflect on my own experience, I think I was ready for that because I had already been in talk therapy with a specialist for 2.5 years. So, I'd already done quite a bit of work to process. I can't imagine how I would have responded if I had not done any of that work yet.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, do you recommend that for someone who is processing trauma, specifically women who are going no contact with a parent and may have a long history of repressed childhood trauma, do you recommend that they do acupuncture in tandem with talk therapy or journaling, or people mention like EMDR? Is there anything that you recommend to balance that out?
Yeah, I would recommend all those things. I think that when you're approaching something from different angles, and to always, if you're in therapy, talk therapy or any type of therapy where you're with a psychologist and able to kind of um, talk about, and I think, okay, so in my mind, I'm thinking of two different things. I know that there are different types of therapists. My sister's a therapist, but I think that if you have a therapist who can allow you, like, ask you those questions that allow you to come to whatever it is that you need to come to and give you that space. And also, I'm a big believer in cognitive therapy too, where you have homework to do as well. But being in some type of treatment that pairs with what you're doing as far as releasing the emotions with acupuncture, I think is always a positive,
Mhm.
always a positive, and always have, and that gives you that support so that when these emotions do come up, you have the support to release them.
Yeah. I think that is great advice for sure.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want a client to walk into that experience without someone there to kind of be a safe place for them in between
Mhm.
sessions. And definitely not if they're brand new, to their healing journey. I typically wait 6 months to a year into working with someone before I recommend that they do that.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I think I've treated a lot of military people, of course, with the NADA protocol, um, and that's the ear acupuncture. And I think, like, for instance, you were saying that you had already been in talk therapy. My my thought would be that it could be possible that if you had not been in talk therapy, that you would have still received a benefit, but it would hit, how can I say, the benefit that you would receive would be in relationship to where you are emotionally with your journey to healing. So if someone had not been in any type of therapy at all and they had the auricular acupuncture, I don't know that it would bring up as much as if you had been. So it could be that it's kind of, and I say that because I haven't read any studies particularly, and I don't want to be um, very definite about what I'm saying because I would want to do the research, because there's a lot of research, a lot of medical research on the NADA protocol and acupuncture and different things. But I know that I had a lot of patients who were not in therapy and had no therapy. And the NADA protocol is for trauma. It's also for for PTSD, and it's also for very big in drug use,
Mhm.
helping people recover from addictions.
Mhm.
And in treating them, they were at different points in their journey, and I didn't get anyone to say that it was a negative experience. Like they experienced more than they were, emotions were coming up and they couldn't handle them. Now I say that, but keep in mind that in the scope of how many people who are receiving acupuncture, I'm treating a very small amount of those. And my experience, I don't want to generalize it. So I'm just speaking to what my experience has been. It could be that you are correct, and that maybe you definitely, before even getting acupuncture, should have at least 6 months to a year, because it's a much broader spectrum than what I have access to, if that makes any sense.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask, I think you were going to touch on this before. So I have this vision of Black women learning to administer acupuncture to other Black women so that, we don't have to venture as far, just so that it's more accessible to us. Is there a way, and based on what I found online, there's like a 7-year course that you have to take to get certified. Are there any shortcuts or fast tracks to being able to help women in our own communities with acupuncture?
Now, with NADA, you don't have to be an acupuncturist to do NADA. So there is a certification that you go through, and I think it's like an extended weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through and you take the test, and you get practice during the process of inserting the needles, and you can become certified. You don't even have to be an acupuncturist. Now, this information may have changed, because I know things are changing, but when I was reading this, it's maybe a couple years old. So I would have to go back and see if that's still the case, but you didn't have to be an acupuncturist. But I am happy to say that there are so many Black acupuncturists out there. Every time I would, be in the company of other acupuncturists, whether it was at a workshop or in class or whatever, there were at least 5 Black people there. So my acupuncturist here where I live is a Black man, and he is phenomenal. And I can think of 5 other Black acupuncturists in the same area. So there is a national association. The one that I saw a couple of years ago, it wasn't very active. So I don't know how many people are members, or if there's another, that's something I'll research, and I can let you know, and maybe you can put it up on your, so that the people who are watching can see. So it's a follow-up, and I can research it and give you that information, so that they'll have some resources to find Black acupuncturists, because I think that is so important. So important.
Yes, that is amazing. Just, I think, to be treated by someone who can understand your perspective on the issues they're treating is like gold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe you can share with us kind of how you came around to acupuncture, what it has personally helped you with, and then if there's any of those conditions you mentioned, the fibroids, hypertension, fertility, that triple negative breast cancer that you want to touch on, that would be great.
Okay. So my journey to acupuncture, it's a long journey. So the first time receiving acupuncture, I think I was in graduate school, and this is the first graduate school. Like, acupuncture is like a third educational venture for myself. But and I had vertigo, and I had one treatment, and I've never had vertigo since. So that was an amazing experience. Like, okay, what is this? What is this? And I had gone to a traditional Chinese medical doctor, and I'm like, what? This is amazing. And so it kind of stuck in my head. I started receiving treatments just for general wellness, because there's this there's a construct that we have in the United States that if you're not ill, you're well. Like, if you're not on medication, you're not dealing with a disease, then you're well, which is not correct. Like, so you have where you're in a state of disease, or you're dealing with disease or sickness or illness, right? And then you have a state of say like if you're doing a hierarchy. So this would be disease, right? And then this level would be, I'm not on any medication, I'm not suffering with the disease. And then this is where this next level would be, or the top tier would be optimal health. So I find that in Western culture, this middle section is where they think is the top tier, but there's a whole nother level where your health is optimized and, you know, you're vibrant, you're lively, you're energetic. You have the ability to do and complete tasks that you want to do without being exhausted at the end of the day. That would be your optimum health. So I started after that one needle, I was like, wow. So I started receiving acupuncture every 2 weeks for general health and to optimize my health for wellness. And then my next experience was I had been traveling abroad, and prior to leaving, my Western doctor, who was really very open-minded, had put me on, because he said, oh, you're going to be gone, your blood pressure is slightly elevated, I'm going to put you on this very small amount of hydrochlorothiazide. And I was like, okay. And I didn't want to take it, but I was like, okay, I will be so far away from my doctor, I will. And so what that is it's a diuretic. So it's getting the fluid out of your body. So while I was in Cambodia, I started having side effects because I traveled from the United States to Ecuador and then Ecuador to Cambodia. And I started having swelling in my legs. And I was like, oh, well, I have, or my ankles, I should say. So I was like, okay, I've been on a plane. So I went to an acupuncturist in Cambodia. She was actually trained in China, but she was from Switzerland. And she would treat me and the swelling would go away and then it would come back. She would treat me again and the swelling would go away and it'd come back. And so then she started looking at my medication, and I was only on that one hydrochlorothiazide. And she looked at the side effects, and everything that I had been experiencing was actually a side effect of the medication that I was taking. And so I sent my doctor back in the US an email, and he was like, oh, okay, well, you know, it really isn't that big of a deal. You can get off of it. And so he said, until you come back. And once I did that, everything went away. And so it gave me a different perspective of Western medicine. And then I went back to her, and not only did I not have the side effects, but I started feeling even better. It was almost like, okay, I'm feeling really good. And I left there, and then I ended up going to Africa for a while and then coming back to the United States. Well, when I got back to the United States, my sister was studying what is like how can I say, spiritual psychology. And she was in a master's program, and she had to do this project. And so I accompanied her to her acupuncture appointment because I was just in love with this medicine and wanted to know more about it. And she had like a scratchy throat. And the doctor was saying, this was a particular particular style of acupuncture. He was a 5 elements acupuncturist, and they treat from the spiritual level. And I'll explain that a little bit more. So in Chinese medicine, coming down the front of your body is called the Ren Mai channel. So it's the Ren channel. And right at this point, there's Ren 22, which is called the Jade Pearl. And he was saying, well, he explained the whole idea of the Jade Pearl, that a pearl is created in an oyster because sand gets in and irritates, and then it excretes these chemicals and different things that create the pearl. So he was saying this is called the Jade Pearl because it can be created through an irritant. So he said, who's irritating you and you're not speaking your truth? And she was like, oh, wow, you know, my husband's been irritating me. And I said, oh, I'm just not going to say much about it. And it was interesting. He treated that point along with some other body points on her. But I was sitting there and I was thinking, oh my goodness, there's an emotional and a spiritual point. And for instance, this right here on the top of the head is do 20. And this is called, well, what this meaning is for do 20 is the meeting point. It's the meeting of you, your higher self, and your ancestors. So oftentimes people will do 20, and that will like be an emotional point, as well as the physical aspect of do 20 is it draws things up. So if you have hemorrhoids, they will probably do 20. If you have hypertension, some of them will stay away from doing do 20 because you don't want to bring the heat to the head. So that's another spirit. There are multiple. Every point is a spiritual point, but there's some that have greater meaning than others. So it was really interesting. I was like, wow. I was like, okay, this is right on my path because I was already a Reiki master. I was into essential oils. I was into crystals. And I thought, okay, this is wonderful. So I started my journey. I moved to California. I am into the film industry. And I was like, okay, I can move to California. I can do the film industry and I can pursue acupuncture. And that's exactly what I did. And through that journey, I started learning, because we have to take a lot of sciences and biology and stuff. I started understanding, because when I first started, I was like, I want nothing to do with Western medicine at all. And then the more I started to learn, the more I understood how everything is just really one medicine and how you can integrate them, right? So a lot of hospitals in China will triage things. Like if you break your leg, you'll go in and get your leg cast, and then they will have people do acupuncture because it speeds up the process of healing, right? So they work together. And then when I did the doctoral program is when I started doing a lot of, it's all about research and empirical information. And I was like, wow, there's research. People are doing research out there to prove that acupuncture works. And it was just amazing. So I was able to like really understand how they can all work together. And when I think of Chinese medicine, I think of there's a whole herb aspect. And when you think of generations, that's when I started thinking about my history growing up. And I thought about the fact that my grandfather would get sick, or he'd have like an upset stomach, and he would go to the swamp and he would come back with a pail full of tree bark and leaves and herbs and things like that. And I was like, wow. So this is not something that's new to me. I'm experiencing it in a new way. Like, so there's a whole herbology. We have to study hundreds of herbs and the interaction with Western medicines and how they interact with each other, and formulas that treat different things, and how to change the formula a little bit by changing one herb. If you're dealing with a person who's dealing with one, has a different way of dealing with things. So that's another part of acupuncture that was very interesting to me. That was like, wow, I'm understanding these herbs now. That, for instance, for fibroids, there are different formulas that can use. I was just talking to one of my friends who's practicing, and she had a young woman come in, and she palpated her abdominal area and was able to feel like fibroids, right, in her lower abdominal area. And she gave her a particular Chinese formula. I think it was like, she said 6 weeks. You couldn't even palpate them. And then she had her go and get tested, and they were so small, like compared to being able, like she was, how can I say, they wanted to do surgery. They wanted to do a hysterectomy, which I think too often they want to do on women, and especially Black women. And she was able to shrink them so small that wasn't even an option anymore. But there's so many different ways and so many different herbs, and then you take the herbs and you do the acupuncture treatment along with that, and maybe some lifestyle changes as well. So when I think of Chinese medicine, there's so many different aspects of it. So you have the herbs, you have Qigong, which there's a medicine-less hospital in China where they only use Qigong. And Qigong are movements. So for instance, like I was saying, every organ is associated with an emotion. You can actually have movements associated with that organ and that emotion, and releasing that energy from your body. And that's Qigong. So a lot of people are familiar with Tai Chi. So Qigong is very similar in some ways, and there's a medical component to it. So you have eating. There's a whole way of eating for Chinese medicine. For instance, say like black sesame seeds are used, and they're good for the kidney. They're good for building up certain fluids in the body. They're all almonds, not almonds. Well, there is one for almonds, but walnuts. Walnuts are really good for yin. Well, didn't have to explain what yin is. Okay, so walnuts are very good for, let's say, brain. They're very good for your brain. So there are different foods that you can eat. There are different herbs that are paired with foods, like when cooking. Say, for instance, you can put in certain herbs when you're cooking and make what they call a congee. A congee is when you cook rice and different foods and herbs, and it's medicinal. And you cook it till it's very, very thin, until nothing is identifiable. It just looks like one thin kind of soup thing. And they will infuse herbs with that, and then you can take that and you're treating your body, you're tonifying your body as well. So there's so many different ways. And when I think of Chinese medicine, it's such a huge thing. And I say huge because I mean, it incorporates more than just what people know of, like needles and herbs. There's a whole lifestyle, a way of being that you can use to help your patients as well. So I would often treat my patients with needles. I would give them herbs. I would, do meditations, guided meditations with them. I would give them different Qigong movements and postures to do. And then Qigong, each organ has a sound as well. So they're different, like you can do different sounds. So the vibration of that sound connects with a certain energy or organ in your body. So the more I learned, the more fascinated I became. And towards the end of the process, I thought treating people has been really wonderful, but how can I be an advocate for the medicine? How can I get this out to my community? And that was important. And because that was what I started with. Like, I want to make sure that Black people utilize this medicine, this way of being, to improve their health. And that's when I started my journey. That was what I had in my mind. And as I went on that journey, I became even more adamant about that, to now, as opposed to just being local and treating people in that area, I want to be able to have a larger reach and have people have this experience and know that there are options other than just pharmaceuticals. And even if you're on a pharmaceutical, I think it's important that when you're working with an acupuncturist or any other type of integrative doctor, whether it be a naturopath or a chiropractor or anything like that, that you have continuity of care. So when I say continuity of care, that your primary care physician, your acupuncturist, and whoever else you're using, your naturopath, they're all on the same page. Like, they all know everything that's going on. So I always give the example is that when I'm treating someone and they have hypertension, I don't say, don't take your medicine. I treat them, and then I am communicating with their primary care physician to the point where as they improve, they decrease the medication and sometimes are able to even come off of the medication. So that's an analogy that I use so that people understand how the two can work together. Because, okay.
I think that is great. And you're starting actually to kind of speak to the audience that I have in mind. I think there's a whole host of women who are on board, they
Mhm.
kind of tap into these more spiritual or esoteric benefits of something like acupuncture. But there's also a facet of Black women who I think when they hear acupuncture or, whatever ideas are associated with acupuncture, they are not inclined to really take it seriously as something that can help them. It doesn't feel relevant or accessible to them. And then, maybe I'll ask you, what is it that you would recommend I tell someone like my grandmother who was born in the 30s and doesn't want to hear about energy or crystals or meditation? All of she would definitely say the words woo woo, right? A lot of us go there when we start to talk about things like this. What could I say to her to get her on board to, just be open-minded enough to try something like this to treat high blood pressure, obesity, even things like, insomnia or eating disorders? What is like a hook I could use to get her on board?
Well, that's a really good question because I entered acupuncture through that journey. But I think the most important thing is that there are studies and research done. So there's medical research and studies done. During my doctorate, I partnered with a cardiologist at UC Irvine because I specialized in hypertension.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did my specialty in while I was in school, is hypertension. So he's a cardiologist, but he does some of the, how can I say, he's a leading, or where he works at UC Irvine, they are leading the research with acupuncture and hypertension and all cardiovascular diseases, right? And so I would tell her that they have acupuncturists working now at Cedar Sinai. One of my friends worked at Cedar Sinai. They have them in fertility clinics. In fertility clinics, they have them at the VA hospitals. Most of them have acupuncturists now. Every time I talk to someone, it's like, "Oh, you should work at the VA." So they're integrating that into regular health care. Most insurances, I won't say most, but many insurances cover a certain amount of treatments per year. So if you have a person who's very, how can I say, entrenched, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but who's very much a part or believing in the Western allopathic medical system that we have, then I think by telling them that they have now started to integrate acupuncturists into that, might be a way in for them. So my personal journey into it was through the spiritual aspect and like to be able to treat that, because prior to that, I had already read this book by Louise Hay that talked about how everything that we're experiencing is because of emotions, and it's called Heal Thy Body, and it's by Louise Hay. So that was what made that connection for me. But for someone who is not, I don't want to say not there as if it's a better place to be, but for someone who is not in that space, then I think coming to them from a medical perspective, and that they can start with something as simple as a community clinic. It makes it much more accessible because acupuncture can range in prices from, I would say probably like $45 in certain areas to $200 and some a session.
Yeah.
So there's a huge range. So with the community clinics, what you'll find is that they'll have one open space as opposed to you having your individual private room. And a lot of them will have the chairs. Some of them have the zero gravity chairs where you can recline back a little. But they will have the chairs where you can go in and they will like have a short conversation with you to kind of figure out what you're dealing with. They'll insert the needles and then you have that moment to just be there with the needles. And then they're going around, so they're able to charge less. They're able to charge, some of them have sliding scales. It may be as little as $20, $15, depending on what part of the country you're in. And they're able to charge less because they're doing more people within a smaller time frame. So if you go to a traditional office and they may be charging you, say, $80 or $150, you're going to be in your own private room and they're going to spend a lot more time with you. But if you're in the clinical model for community clinics, then you know, they ask that people be quiet and not talk. So you have your own space. They'll most likely have blankets if you want one. You have a blanket that you can put over yourself, and you know, insert the needles, and you still get the time. Just sit there, and then they go and they move to the next person and the next person and the next person and the next person. And I think the community clinics are really great, and that's a great entry if you want to maintain your costs. And then there are some acupuncturists that do a sliding scale.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
let me recap because you made two really good recommendations. So for women who have never tried acupuncture, but they're intrigued, they want to just kind of get their feet wet without investing too much. A first step is to see if their insurance covers some sessions. I think it's anywhere from like 3 to 10 sessions a year will be covered by, you know, employer provided insurance. A second option is sites like Groupon usually have deals on like a first time treatment for different clinics in your area. So that's a great place to check. And then, oh, modern acupuncture. So modern acupuncture is a chain of community clinics, very similar to what you were describing. They have locations across the country. They're most heavily located in the West Coast and the Southwest, but they do have locations across the country. It won't be a convenient option for everyone because they're not everywhere, but for a lot of people, that is an accessible option. And if I recall, that is where I got treated, and I had a monthly membership that I think was $69, and it covered 2 or 3 sessions per month. And so I think that was a really good deal. Yeah, I think those are 3 great places women can start if they're, you know, interested in taking that first step. And then before we get ready to wrap up, I want to ask you what resources you would recommend if we want to read some more about acupuncture, if we want to study up and see what the next step might be. What are some resources that we could look into?
Okay. A couple of good books. One is called Grasping the Wind, and that book is by Andrew Ellis. And then another one is Between Heaven and Earth. And I wrote down the author's name. That is Harriet Benefield, is the first author listed on that. There are 2 authors that she's the first one listed on that book.
I think the second author there is Efren Korngold. I'll put the link to those books in the description. And you also mentioned Heal Your Body by Louise Hay.
By Louise Hay.
Louise Hay, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we have covered everything. Are there any final closing thoughts that you'd like to add, like how we can get in touch with you, if there's a way that we can work with you, how we can pay you to help us take the next step in our healing journey?
For now, the best way to get in contact with me would be my email address, and that is my name, Loria King, at M as in Mary, A as in Apple, C as in cat.com. And my name is spelled LORIAKING at mac.com.
So that is Loria King at math.com.
Yes.
Okay. And then is there a way that we can connect with you as far as like hiring you to help us? And if not, what are your plans in the future so we can kind of, keep up with you? Where can we follow you until you're ready to go full scale with that?
Okay, so for now, when you reach out to me via email, we can have that conversation. And so what I do is I utilize all of the knowledge that I have in the different in acupuncture and other integrative medicines to help you navigate. And basically, for me, it's important. I am for you what I didn't have when I was on this journey, looking for ways in which to deal with certain things in my body. Um, I am currently in the process of putting together a landing page so that people will have the ability to go there and then book through Calendly, if I said that correctly. And I'm also starting a YouTube page. So once I start that YouTube page, I will see. I will reach out to Dani and see if she wants to put that information up for you guys. I would love to work with you because it's so important. The way I look at Black women is from a holistic perspective. We are healthy, whole, vibrant, and it's returning to that. Like whatever you're dealing with, it's returning to that. And I'm teaming with my sister, who is a therapist and or coach, kind of, to work with a lot of, because I think as you mentioned earlier, Dani, I think it's so important because I know the emotional and stress component that we deal with as Black women. I think it's important that if you're receiving acupuncture for any reason, that you are also dealing with the underlying causes of that, right? That's very important. And the thing I love about Chinese medicine is that it deals with the root of the problem and not the symptoms. So in Chinese medicine, they have this thing called the root and the stem. So the root is what's causing the problem, and the stems are the symptoms. So you treat the root, and sometimes you treat the root and the stem. So if you come in and you're having really bad side effects and it's impacting your life so much that you're not able to do normal functions, then I'm going to treat the root and the stem. But if you're coming in and the symptoms are not so bad, I'm going to focus all of my energy on treating the root. And once the root has been treated, then the side effects / stems go away. So that's kind of our way of dealing with things. And that's so important. Yeah.
I could not agree more. As soon as you have your YouTube channel going, a landing page, sorry about my dog, anything that I can share, with people who want to connect with you and learn more, just let me know and I will definitely do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today, for educating us. I really have enjoyed connecting with you. Sorry again about him. And yes, I look forward to having you here again so we can learn even more. And yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in.
And thank you. Thank you, Dani, and thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.